Entergy is proud to support programming on LPB and greener practices that preserve Louisiana.
The goal of our environmental and sustainability initiatives really is to ensure that our kids and future generations can be left with a cleaner planet.
Additional support provided by the Fred B. and Ruth B. Ziegler Foundation and the Ziegler Art Museum located in Jennings City Hall. The museum focuses on emerging Louisiana artists and is an historical and cultural center for Southwest Louisiana. And the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting, with support from viewers like you.
There's a hollowness in your chest. You feel like you're being sucked into it.
A nation grieving the loss of its children.
You know, what you make happen for somebody else, God is going to make happen for you. So I felt like I won't lose blessing somebody else.
A New Orleans mom finding her way around the formula shortage.
That warm water is in place. All you need now is a hurricane to move over, that turbocharged water, and these storms can blossom.
Hurricane season is among us. What you need to know.
Hi everyone, I'm Kara St. Cyr. Andre Morrow is out today. We start tonight's newscast with a recap of the Uvalde, Texas school shooting. National outlets now reporting that 19 children were killed and 2 teachers after an 18-year-old with an AR-15 gun barricaded himself in a 4th grade classroom. Since then, 3 children and 3 adults are still fighting for their lives in the hospital. As authorities try to piece together the exact timeline of events, questions are now mounting about gun reform and school security. President Joe Biden held a press conference addressing all of these topics. I'd like to play some of that for you now.
As a nation, we have to ask, when in God's name are we going to stand up to the gun lobby? When in God's name we do what we all know in our gut needs to be done? It's been 3,448 days, 10 years since I stood up at a high school in Connecticut, a grade school in Connecticut, where another gunman massacred 26 people, including 20 first graders at Sandy Hook Elementary School. Since then, there have been over 900 incidents of gunfires reported on school grounds. Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, Santa Fe High School in Texas, Oxford High School in Michigan. The list goes on, and the list grows when it includes mass shootings at places like movie theaters, houses of worship, as we saw just 10 days ago, the grocery store in Buffalo, New York. I am sick and tired of it. We have to act. And don't tell me we can't have an impact on this carnage. I spent my career as a senator and a vice president working to pass common sense gun laws. We can and won't prevent every tragedy, but we know they work and have positive impact. When we passed the assault weapons ban, mass shootings went down. When the law expired, mass shootings tripled. The idea that an 18-year-old kid can walk into a gun store and buy 2 assault weapons is just wrong. What in God's name do you need an assault weapon for except to kill someone? Deer aren't running through the forest with Kevlar vests on, for God's sake. It's just sick. And the gun manufacturers have spent 2 decades aggressively marketing assault weapons, which make them the most and largest profit. For God's sake, we have to have the courage to stand up to the industry. Here's what else I know. Most Americans support common sense laws, common sense gun laws. I just got off a trip from Asia, meeting with Asian leaders. And I learned of this while I was on the aircraft. And what struck me on that 17-hour flight, what struck me was these kinds of mass shootings rarely happen anywhere else in the world. Why? They have mental health problems. They have domestic disputes in other countries. They have people who are lost. But these kinds of mass shootings never happen with the kind of frequency they happen in America. Why? Why are we willing to live with this carnage? Why do we keep letting this happen?
We'll come back to this topic later on in our newscast, but first, some good news. Beth Courtney, our previous and long-standing CEO at LPB, was awarded the Daniel K. Miller Award by PBS President and CEO Paula Kerger. This award recognizes managers in the public media system whose leadership, vision, courage, and commitment to the mission of public media have inspired their colleagues and created a lasting impact in their communities. Let's take a look at a few highlights from Paula's speech.
In 1984, Beth became the first woman to lead a statewide public broadcasting network and later became the first female vice chair of the PBS board. In addition to serving 2 terms on the PBS board of directors, Beth was appointed by President George W. Bush to serve on the board of directors for the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. She also served as chairman of the board for the Association of Public Television Stations, APTS, the Organization of State Broadcasting Executives, OSBE, and the National Educational Telecommunications Association, NETA. We all know her as a courageous and passionate advocate for public broadcasting, and she will be truly missed in her retirement. Speaking personally, Beth was a great inspiration to me. When I first joined public media, there were very few women in leadership roles. That generation of women were so very important to my group of rising leaders, and Beth never hesitated to offer her guidance, all delivered with perfect candor and a very big smile.
And now to news making headlines across the state. A bill to prevent government entities from requiring proof of COVID vaccination for entry into public places or private businesses died in the Senate committee on Wednesday. Proponents of the bill said it was a good compromise because it kept the government oversight to a minimum while giving private businesses the freedom to impose their own restrictions. But opponents insisted the bill go further and prevent businesses from enacting mandates at all, while some argued that the bill would open the door for discrimination. Confederate Memorial Day and Robert E. Lee Day haven't been formally observed in Louisiana for years, but some lawmakers are pushing for them to be legally dissolved. Representative Matthew Willard drafted House Bill 248, which made its way out of the Senate committee on Tuesday. Opponents of the bill say that holidays preserve history, while proponents believe the bill celebrates the memory of slavery. The Women in Sports bill, which would keep transgender youth from playing sports with cisgendered girls, is now on the governor's desk. The Senate gave final passage on Monday, meaning Governor John Bel Edwards would have to sign or veto. Last year, Edwards was vocal about his opposition and ultimately dismissed the legislation. But following a failed override session, the bill reappeared this year with little comment from Edwards. FEMA had a 3-day feedback period this week for a site to relocate Hurricane Ida survivors. The community is called Kelowna, located in St. Charles Parish, and it could be the site for up to 75 group units. FEMA says they need the housing for people left homeless after the hurricane. Feedback was gathered concerning the project's draft environmental assessment. 20 jobs are coming to Acadia by way of rice. Louisiana economic development officials announced Wednesday that Supreme Rice, a rice milling company, is investing $16.2 million in facilities to make ready-to-eat products. The company will build a facility to first cook the rice in Mermentau and add a parboil in an already existing building in Crowley. Construction is expected to start later on this year.
At the end of the month and in preparation for hurricane season, 4 of the world's top experts on hurricanes and extreme weather will hold a briefing from LSU for media. Now, all 4 are from LSU, but right now we've got 2 of them in our studio, and they are Dr. Jill Trepagna, she's a hurricane expert, and Dr. Barry Keim, he is a state climatologist. It's fantastic to have you here right now because there's a lot to talk about. And one of the things we want to talk about is the temperature in the Gulf of Mexico and the loop current with hurricane season upon us, why that's a big factor. Who wants to take it first?
Go ahead, Barry. I'll jump in there. Yeah, so what they're finding right now is the loop current is it's deflected a little further north than normal, which means that we're getting a larger intrusion of very warm water from the Caribbean into the Gulf of Mexico. It sets us up for warm sea surface temperatures across the Gulf, and that's not good timing right now with hurricane season starting.
So when a storm develops in the Gulf and you've already got that warmer temperature, worse things can happen.
That's the fuel. That's what powers the storms, feeds all that energy into the hurricanes. Not good news right now.
And one thing you guys have noticed is that this model looks very similar to the model in 2005, which is when Katrina, Rita, others were happening.
Yeah, so that warm water is in place. All you need now is a hurricane to move over, that turbocharged water, and these storms can blossom.
Okay, and Jill, we've already had a little system that developed really not far from Grand Isle and then washed ashore in Alabama, but there were some forecasts that this would develop into something that's significant. But I want to talk about the LSU study, which took place last fall, and this is the first year now that it's being used because of the conditions in the Gulf of Mexico being different than the entire Atlantic Basin. It gives different forecasts more specific for us. You were on that study.
Yes, absolutely. So Dr. Paul Miller in oceanography was the lead of that paper. And what we found was you could look at the temperature at about 3.5 miles above the surface of the ocean into the middle troposphere, that first layer of the atmosphere, and relate that to the number of named storms we would see entering the Gulf of Mexico. The Atlantic Basin as a whole is usually what is predicted for from, say, Colorado State and other larger areas. But the Gulf of Mexico as a sub-basin is a bit unique, and because we have this influence of the loop current and some additional parameters that would make the storms in the Gulf maybe not match exactly what we would see in the Atlantic, that's why the study happened, was that we could focus on the Gulf.
Okay, and that's where we are,
Yes.
and we feel what happens coming off the Gulf. And so the study's been done in May now.
Yes,
using current data.
Absolutely.
So this is brand new.
This is brand new, and so the model itself relies on the May prior to the start of the season. And so we've run the model so far, but we do still have a handful of days left in the month of May. And once that's done, that media briefing on the 31st will include the latest and greatest that has come out of that model for a prediction for the Gulf of Mexico.
Are you expecting anything? What are you seeing?
We're thinking about 4 named storms based on what we see, which holds with what Colorado State University put out, because typically about a quarter of the storms that are predicted for the entire Atlantic Basin end up making their way into the Gulf of Mexico. And they predicted about 20, and so 4, it's pretty close to that quarter mark.
How does this help people prepare for the hurricane season better? You know, when you have years that lapse, when you don't have many storms, it's not that you get complacent, but it's just not on your mind. Well, everywhere around southeast and west Louisiana you look, there's damage from the past few years of big storms. So hurricanes are very much in the forefront of people's minds. How does this information help them prepare?
I think ultimately you might see a forecast for the entire Atlantic Basin, and it might allow you to more easily dismiss it, right? Because you're saying, oh, well, I'm not part of the East Coast, I'm not part of Florida, so you might think it's not relatable to you. But this one specifically is related to the Gulf of Mexico, and there's really not an exit path within the Gulf of Mexico without hitting land first. So I think the idea that the storms would actually enter the Gulf of Mexico is more specific for those coastal citizens. They can take it with a little bit higher relatability, right? Thinking that this does impact me, or the likelihood that it will impact me is much higher. And so they might get more prepared early on instead of being caught off guard.
Yeah, and, this is Texas, all of Texas to Florida, and we're right in the middle of it. And I know that, Barry, is one of the things that concerns you the most, especially with the sea surface temperature.
Yeah, well, as Jill was mentioning, once something gets into the Gulf, it's going to roll up on land somewhere, most likely. We don't get many what we call fish storms in the Gulf of Mexico. It's not nearly as vast as the Pacific, the Atlantic Ocean rather. And and of course in Louisiana, I can't emphasize this enough. We always have to be prepared, no matter what the forecasts are telling us. Right. All it takes is 1992. Hurricane Andrew, the first storm of the season, deep into August, okay? And look what it did to Florida and then eventually here in Louisiana. So we always have to be prepared.
All right, so we'll look forward to finding out what happens on the 31st with all the data. But to have you here first, it's fantastic. I'm excited about that. And it's good for everyone to know because you can't be too prepared.
That's correct.
Absolutely.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks very much.
Appreciate it.
probably heard the stories of the baby formula shortage on a loop these past 2 weeks, with parents struggling to find the appropriate kind for their kids. One woman in New Orleans found herself in the same predicament 2 weeks ago, but she found a way around the shortage. I sat down with Siobhan Landry as she gave me her strategy.
So my twins were born in December. They were born preemies a lot earlier than we had planned. So they were born at 3 and 4 pounds, 4 pounds. It was hectic, but they made it here safe, so that was the most important thing.
Siobhan Landry's twins, Royalty in yellow and Rain in blue, need a very special formula. When they were born, they had digestive issues and couldn't drink just anything.
The formula that was chosen was specifically chosen for them. We had to switch it one time, and we finally found the formula that we needed that digested well, that did well with them. And so the digestive systems were very, sensitive. We couldn't keep switching or changing. We don't have that luxury or option to do it.
But then this happened.
The shortage of baby formula has grown into a major challenge for parents all around the country.
In the earliest moments of the baby formula shortage, the Landrys knew something was up. Getting to the last container of Enfamil Gentle Ease was nerve-wracking.
The last straw that broke the camel's back for us was when my husband and my son drove around for 6 hours from store to store to store looking for milk and could not find any. And at that point, I had to go on social media and get my friends to help me out.
Okay, moms, what we doing about this formula shortage? My husband has been to several stores looking for this formula.
The work paid off. She found it.
Yes, Lord.
But through social media, Landry found other moms in her situation. The shortage didn't stop in New Orleans. It was nationwide, and it was hurting parents all over the country.
Other moms started saying, hey, we don't need that kind, but we need this kind. And if you're out and you see this kind, let me know and I'll be looking for your kind. So now we're like switching, and then it went from just New Orleans to Baton Rouge to Slidell, and now it's like, I'm in Maryland, I have your kind, I'll ship it to you if you see. So I started getting shipments.
Landry created a network of parents supplying baby formula throughout the nation.
This is the milk Bible. I call it my little milk Bible. This is my journal. I have everything in here, all the moms.
Every time a mom reaches out to her on social media, Landry writes down their name, address, and the type of formula they need. Then she reaches out to pediatric clinics and other moms to see who has it.
As soon as I get another mom that reach out to me, I have to write it down and just stay organized because it started growing rapidly. And I was like, okay, y'all, it's not just 3 or 4 of us. It's a lot of us. The community is people all over. So I keep everything in here. So when I go to the post office, I use it. I have the address, I ship.
With 20 to 30 moms DMing Landry for help, she visits the post office and pediatric clinics multiple times a week, sometimes even shipping cans of her own formula. But she says it's worth it.
If I could give them 1 or 2 cans just to help them out, hold them over until they find a new solution the same way I did, then that's a risk I gotta be willing to take because, what you make happen for somebody else, God is gonna make happen for you. So I felt like I won't lose blessing somebody else,
The U.S. received a shipment of 78,000 pounds of baby formula from overseas on Monday. So it's the first of more shipments expected to be flown into the U.S. as the White House looks for more long-term strategies to combat the shortage. Many parents are finding themselves at a loss on how to have hard conversations with their kids about tragic events, like this week's Uvalde, Texas shooting. Here with me today is John Otzenberger, a clinical psychologist. He's here to discuss strategies for talking with your children about traumatic experiences. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
So, like I was saying, the Uvalde, Texas shooting has really catapulted the nation into just this state of grief and shock. And for parents, this is a really difficult time because you have to explain this to your kids. So how do you start this conversation?
It's a great question, and I think the first step in having a conversation with your child is actively listening to what they have to say. And so they may have a lot of questions for you, they may not. You may see a difference in their behavior in terms of the way they're acting at home and maybe in terms of not wanting to go to school. So the first step would be listening.
So is there an age limit on this conversation? How young is too young?
There's really no age limit. I think ages and stages are appropriate, and what you're going to hear from an 8-year-old is very different than what you're going to hear from a 15 or a 16-year-old. So younger children may ask questions that surround the idea of safety. They may ask a lot of questions, and so you have to be patient with them. And what you want to do is a little bit of chunking, which means you give them a little bit of information at a time. Versus a teenager, the conversations are going to be a lot more sophisticated.
So whenever you're talking to a child, a young child, it's really important just to let them ask these questions as opposed to talking to a teenager. Maybe you can give them a little bit more information.
Yeah, I think that's a good distinction. You know, you want to listen to your younger children, and you may have to guide them. They may not have the words to ask the questions in that way, and so it's a little bit different support in that way. For older teenagers, it may be an idea of listening to, oftentimes they'll report anger and a lot of anxiety over this, and actually as a parent, how do you empower them and give them ways that they can be proactive in sort of moving through this anger and anxiety.
Are there any details that you need to leave out?
I think for younger kids, the specific details of the tragedy you can probably leave out. You want to listen to them in terms of what they know about it. I think a really important thing to remember is that if you have your TV turned to the news, and there's this constant loop of information that's coming out about the tragedy, don't assume that your kids aren't listening. That may greatly impact the way that they are experiencing anxiety and grief.
I'm not a parent, but that's something that I would be thinking about is, you know, how is what's on the TV constantly impacting those kids?
Yeah.
So that brings me to my next question. You know, kids are watching this stuff on TV. What if they develop some sort of fear? Maybe they feel like, I don't want to go to school, I'm scared.
Yeah, that may be the case, particularly for kids that are closer to the affected area where the tragedy happened. So proximity plays a big part in this, and so you really need to listen to that carefully. School counselors are fantastic resources for kids that are struggling in terms of thinking about coming back to school. School psychologists and administrators do a really wonderful job. If parents have questions about safety, if they're concerned themselves, those are the people that they need to talk to, and it sort of provides a team for their child to work with.
So speaking of parents, I mean, they're watching this too. What do they do if they're starting to, you know, struggle a little bit mentally with this type of information and they're worried about sending their kids to school? Yeah,
that is a real possibility. Again, the closer a person is to the tragedy, the more that's probably going to happen. Talking to school counselors, talking to administrators, talking to a therapist, a loved one, coaches. It's really important to reach out as an adult, talking to friends, getting feedback, and talking about your anxiety will help, but also going back to the school as a resource to get information that you feel supported by.
So schools really do play a big role in this, school counselors and just really getting comfortable with bringing your kids and...
Yeah. And I would say that the American School Counselor Association has a wonderful website that has fantastic information about tips and things to do and how to have conversations with your kids related to the tragedies.
So are there any other tips that you have for me that maybe parents or children can use to get through this really difficult time?
Yeah, I think the idea of really actively listening to your child, having the courage to be imperfect. That means asking questions that you think may cause anxiety for your kid, but being able to ask those questions and being able to comfort your child will be important over the days and weeks and months to come.
So really just be gentle, don't overwhelm your children, and just let them come to you with their questions.
Yeah, they can come to you, but it's certainly okay over time to say, hey, how are you doing? Right? Have you been thinking about this stuff lately? What's going on with that?
All right, well, thank you again for joining us, Dr. Otzenberger. Thank you. We all appreciate it. And for more resources, you can head to PBS for Parents Online, which offers resources to help kids navigate tragic events. Before you leave us, we'd like to end this broadcast with a tribute to the 19 children and 2 teachers of Robb Elementary who were taken too soon. We're sending our thoughts and prayers to all of those families. And that's our show for this week. Remember, you can watch anything LPB anytime, wherever you are, with our LPB PBS app. You can catch LPB news and public affairs shows as well as other Louisiana programs you've come to enjoy over the years. And please like us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram. From everyone here at LPB, I'm Kara St. Cyr. Until next time, that's the state we're in.
Entergy is proud to support programming on LPB and greener practices that preserve Louisiana.
The goal of our environmental and sustainability initiatives really is to ensure that our kids and future generations can be left with a cleaner planet.
Additional support provided by the Fred B. and Ruth B. Ziegler Foundation and the Ziegler Art Museum located in Jennings City Hall. The museum focuses on emerging Louisiana artists and is an historical and cultural center for Southwest Louisiana. And the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting, with support from viewers like you.